If you take your goods from your supplier directly in China and send them directly into Europe, for example, obviously the US isn't going to tariff that. Europe is cutting deals with China and they're reducing the tariffs and the VAT that they had in place. And they're opening up trade deals so that it's even easier to get goods from China into Europe than it used to be. So when I first started thinking about going international many years ago, remember we started selling private label in 2016, and there was a lot of talk around diversifying and expanding to international marketplaces. As a matter of fact, I know a lot of sellers that did it, and the vast majority really struggled with it because it's not as easy as just listing your items online on another marketplace. You have to solve for a whole new marketing strategy. You have to make sure that the taste of the market really wants your product and your design. You have to, previously, you would have to relaunch the product altogether because you would start with 0 reviews. Basically, you would have a few reviews until you hit 10 reviews over there. And so it was a brand new product launch. So you have new logistics, new product launch, new marketing, new PPC, languages, not to mention you have tariffs, taxes, VATs, regulations, paperwork, a nightmare to deal with. And so many sellers that I know expanded, lost money, and then retracted and decided to retreat and just stick to .com. And what I always thought, my thesis was the juice was not worth all of that squeeze and the markets were smaller. But recently I've had a couple things that have changed my mind. The first being that I met a student, an Inner Circle member, who is doing $10 million and 9 of it is international. Now, he's doing really, really well in Europe with his product. As a matter of fact, he owns as much as 40% of the market for the niche he's in. But over here in America, when he tried to expand into America, he really is not doing well. He's struggling and he owns maybe 5% of the market. So even though the US market is 10, 20 times bigger, he owns a much smaller percentage. The cost per click for ads are so much higher, and there are so many more competitors that it's harder for him to get market share. And so I always thought that the market share percentage would be pretty similar. If I owned 30% of the market in the US, I would own 30% of the market in Europe. And even if that's 10%, I figured 10%, 10%. And with the market being significantly smaller, unless you really go to a lot of international, like all of Europe, for example, I was thinking it really wasn't worth it. But the reality is you can dominate a niche much easier over there, because if you can cut your teeth and be really good at .com, it means you can excel in other marketplaces where it's less competitive, because you've already proven yourself in a very competitive marketplace where you have to really know your stuff in order to win. You have a much better chance of getting an outsized market share in those other markets. So that's the first thing.
Hey, I know you're enjoying the content, but I wanted to also let you know really quickly about our masterclasses. Many of them are free. If you have questions about Amazon, you want some advanced strategies, you want to dive deep, check out those classes. The link is below.
The second thing was the tariffs. Now, these tariffs coming into the US are devastating if you source from China. They're very, very difficult. And we have a bipolar president that is going to give you 200% one day, 30% another day, 150% another day. It's a really, really difficult market to predict. And it's very tough. Now, there's a couple strategies there that we've spoken about in other calls around using bonded warehouses, around working on your COGS. But international expansion is another great way to diversify your risk for these tariffs and this administration that seemingly is unpredictable. So what I mean by that is that if you take your goods from your supplier directly in China and send them directly into Europe, for example, obviously the US isn't going to tariff that. And now with the US polarizing itself and turning on its allies, so to say, not to be political, Europe is cutting deals with China and they're reducing the tariffs and the VAT that they had in place. And they're opening up trade deals so that it's even easier to get goods from China into Europe than it used to be. So you have the opportunity to try to reduce the pain you're going to feel in the US and maybe absorb some of the tariffs in the short term to take market share in the US as some of your competitors are going to get scared and retract. I'm a big fan of putting your foot on the gas right now and trying to get more market share, even if it's a little painful, because I think when a lot of people are scared is the time for you to be aggressive, for you to be greedy. Now, what I think though is that you need to diversify that a little bit, and a great way to do that is through international expansion.